shocking confession rocks Willow Kane trial. The truth behind Drew's shooting explodes in courtroom drama. The tension in the Port Charles courthouse had been suffocating for weeks, but nothing could have prepared the judge, jury, and spectators for what was about to unfold on what many believed would be the most decisive day of Willow Kane's trial. As Ada Justine Turner prepared to deliver what could have been the final nail in Willow's coffin, everything changed in an instant. The unexpected arrival. The courtroom doors burst open with a force that silenced every whispered conversation. All eyes turned as a small figure in a simple blue dress, accompanied by a woman in nanny attire, made her way through the crowd. It was Scout Quartermain, Drew Kane's 7-year-old daughter, her eyes already glistening with unshed tears. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Judge Harrison looked up from his bench, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. The bailiff moved instinctively, but Scout was already moving with a determination that seemed far beyond her years. Alexis Davis gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she recognized her great-granddaughter. The child's destination became immediately clear. She was heading straight for the witness stand. "Scout, what are you?" the judge began, but the little girl's voice cut through his attempt to regain control. "My daddy is a big liar," Scout shouted, her small voice echoing through the cavernous courtroom. The statement hung in the air like a thunderclap, each word landing with devastating precision. The child's testimony unfolds. What followed was perhaps the most crucial testimony of the entire trial, delivered not by a trained witness, but by a traumatized child who had been carrying a terrible burden in silence for months. Scout's lips trembled as she climbed onto the stand, her nanny's hand leading hers only when the bailiff assured her he would stay close. "Mommy Willow is nice," Scout began, her childish voice breaking. "She never wanted to hurt Daddy. I know because I saw what really happened that night." The prosecution's face turned ashen. Justine Turner, who had been so confident moments before, suddenly found herself watching her case crumble in real time. Even the judge leaned forward, his judicial composure slipping. Scout described the night in question with the clarity that only innocence and truth could provide. She explained that she hadn't been sleeping, despite her father's insistence that she had been safely tucked in bed. Her voice, small but steady, painted a picture that contradicted everything Drew had testified to in that very courtroom. "Daddy was talking on the phone," Scout said, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "I heard him. He said he was going to fix things. Then he told somebody that he was going to make it look like Mommy Willow did it." A collective intake of breath rippled through the gallery. Someone in the back let out an audible gasp. The mechanism of deception. Scout's account grew more detailed and more damning with each exchange. She described her father deliberately positioning himself in a way that would create the appearance of injury. Her innocent words carried the weight of eyewitness testimony that no legal argument could overcome. "He had a gun," Scout continued, her small hands shaking. "He looked at it for a long time. Then he did something to himself. It hurt him, I think, but he smiled. He said, 'This will fix everything. Willow will go to prison, and Scout will forget about the rest of them.'" The words struck Alexis Davis like a physical blow. The matriarch of the Davis family, already stretched thin by the knowledge that her great-granddaughter had been suffering through these revelations alone, suddenly understood the full scope of what had been done to this innocent child. Drew hadn't just manipulated adults. He had traumatized his own daughter by forcing her to witness his calculated deception, all while threatening to isolate her from the family she loved. The collapse of a conspiracy. Willow sat frozen at the defense table, her attorney's hand gripping her shoulder. This was vindication, but it was the most painful kind, achieved through the sacrifice of a child who should never have been placed in such a position. The jury members shifted uncomfortably, their faces reflecting the moral complexity of the situation before them. They were no longer deciding whether a woman had committed a crime. They were witnessing the exposure of a man's desperate, calculated scheme to frame his wife. Judge Harrison immediately called for a recess, recognizing that the entire trajectory of the trial had fundamentally shifted. As bailiffs gently guided Scout from the stand, she walked directly to her mother's side. Not her biological mother, but the woman who had shown her more genuine kindness than her own father ever had. The reckoning begins. The impact of Scout's testimony would ripple far beyond the courtroom walls. Alexis knew that what had just happened required immediate action. The question was no longer whether Willow would be acquitted. The question was whether Drew would face charges for perjury, obstruction of justice, and worst of all, the psychological abuse of his own child. As reporters scrambled to file their stories and legal experts debated the implications on every news channel in Port Charles, one thing had become abundantly clear. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from the most powerful voices in the room. Sometimes it comes from the most innocent ones, the ones we forget to listen to in our pursuit of justice and revenge. Scout's confession had shattered more than just a trial. It had exposed the depths of a father's betrayal and, perhaps, provided the path towards something resembling truth in a courthouse that had become far too complicated for anyone to navigate. The gates of Port Charles had opened one more time to reveal the fallibility of those who wielded power without compassion, and a child's voice had finally cut through the lies. Next, we will learn about the shocking courtroom revelations that have turned Dr. Portia Robinson's world completely upside down and the devastating ripple effects that are about to tear through Port Charles in the coming weeks. The usually composed and dignified Dr. Portia Robinson never could have anticipated the humiliation and exposure that awaited her when she took the witness stand. What should have been a routine court appearance transformed into a nightmare scenario that no one saw coming. Alexis Davis, despite her obvious reluctance to dig into such deeply personal territory, had no choice but to perform her duties as an attorney with precision and determination. Question after devastating question, Alexis systematically dismantled the carefully constructed facade that Portia had been maintaining for months. The tension in the courtroom was absolutely palpable as spectators watched in stunned silence while one of General Hospital's most respected physicians was forced to reveal the most intimate details of her private life for all to see and judge. The bombshell revelations came tumbling out one after another like dominoes falling in succession. Portia had engaged in a passionate affair with Dr. Isaiah Gannon, and the complications arising from this relationship go far beyond mere workplace impropriety. Isaiah isn't just any colleague. He's technically Portia's employee at General Hospital, which adds multiple layers of ethical violations and professional misconduct to an already explosive situation. The power dynamic between them as supervisor and subordinate makes the entire affair even more scandalous in the eyes of the medical community and the general public watching this drama unfold in real time. But the revelations didn't stop there. The courtroom erupted with whispers and gasps when Portia confirmed what many had suspected but hoped wasn't true. She is carrying a child, and the identity of the father remains shrouded in uncertainty and doubt. The baby could belong to Isaiah Gannon, the man with whom she shared those stolen moments of passion and intimacy. However, there's an equally strong possibility that Curtis Ashford, her husband and the man she vowed to love and honor, is actually the biological father of this unborn child. The timing of the pregnancy coincides with her involvement with both men, creating a paternity puzzle that promises to dominate storylines for weeks to come. The path forward for determining biological paternity will be fraught with emotional landmines and technical challenges that could derail the entire process. Medical tests aren't always foolproof, and when human emotions and desperation enter the equation, the potential for manipulation and deception increases exponentially. Portia will undoubtedly insist on the most accurate and reliable testing methods available, but can she truly trust the results when so many people have vested interests in the outcome? The psychological toll of not knowing which man fathered her child while carrying the baby to term will be immense, and viewers will watch as this confident doctor slowly unravels under the pressure. Here's where the situation takes a potentially sinister turn that could redefine everything we think we know about Isaiah Gannon. On the surface, Isaiah appears to be the easier option for Portia, the path of least resistance in this impossible situation. Curtis Ashford has already endured more than his fair share of betrayal and deception from Portia regarding matters of paternity and honesty. The revelation about Trina's true parentage nearly destroyed their relationship before, and Curtis has made it abundantly clear that he won't tolerate being lied to again. Given this history, one would assume both Portia and Curtis would demand multiple independent paternity tests from different laboratories to ensure complete accuracy and eliminate any possibility of error or tampering. However, there's a disturbing possibility that hasn't been adequately considered by anyone involved in this mess. What if Isaiah isn't content to simply let fate and science determine the outcome? What if he has his own agenda that requires him to be identified as the father regardless of biological reality? Isaiah has access to laboratory facilities, medical records, and testing protocols through his position at General Hospital. He possesses the technical knowledge and expertise necessary to intercept test samples, manipulate results, or even substitute DNA specimens without anyone being the wiser. The ease with which a skilled physician could corrupt the testing process is genuinely frightening when you stop to consider all the possibilities. Isaiah's motivation for ensuring the paternity results name him as the father could stem from several different sources. Perhaps he's genuinely fallen in love with Portia and sees this baby as his ticket to building a life with her, pushing Curtis permanently out of the picture. Maybe he's operating from a place of guilt and responsibility, believing he owes it to Portia and the child to step up and claim fatherhood even if he harbors doubts about the biological truth. There's also the possibility that Isaiah has darker, more calculated reasons for wanting to be named as the father, reasons connected to inheritance, custody arrangements, or other factors we haven't yet discovered. Whatever his true motivation might be, Isaiah is absolutely the type of character who would rationalize tampering with paternity tests as being for the greater good or protecting everyone involved from more pain. The scenario becomes even more complicated when we consider that Curtis isn't the only person who's been burned by Portia's lies and deceptions in the past. He's already learned the hard way that trusting Portia's word without independent verification leads to heartbreak and betrayal. Curtis should be demanding multiple tests from different facilities with strict chain of custody protocols to prevent anyone from having the opportunity to corrupt the results. But will he actually follow through on those reasonable precautions, or will he be so emotionally devastated by the entire situation that he simply accepts whatever results are presented to him? The Curtis we've come to know is strong and resilient, but even the strongest person has a breaking point. Meanwhile, Trina Robinson finds herself caught in the crossfire of her parents' imploding marriage, and the emotional devastation she's experiencing cuts deeper than any physical wound ever could. Trina has always been the glue holding her family together, the bright spot that gave both Portia and Curtis reason to push through their difficulties and disagreements. Learning that her parents are separating has shaken Trina to her very core, challenging everything she thought she knew about love, commitment, and family stability. The anger she feels toward her mother for destroying their family through selfish actions and poor choices wars with her desperate desire to somehow fix what's been broken. Trina remembers all too well the last time her parents discovered they shared a child. Specifically, her. That revelation brought them together after years of separation, giving them a second chance at love and building the family Trina had always dreamed of having. The question that haunts Trina now is whether history could possibly repeat itself. Could the existence of another child, another sibling for Trina, provide the catalyst needed to heal the wounds between Curtis and Portia? Could this unborn baby become the bridge that reconnects her fractured family and restores some semblance of normalcy to their lives? But Trina isn't naive, and she understands that the situation is infinitely more complicated this time around. Isaiah Gannon represents an obstacle that didn't exist during her parents' previous reconciliation. His presence in Portia's life and his potential role as the baby's father means that Curtis might never be able to move past the betrayal, regardless of paternity results. And then there's Jordan Ashford to consider, Curtis's ex-wife, who still harbors feelings for him and would likely jump at any opportunity to rekindle their relationship if Curtis's marriage to Portia officially ends. The thought that keeps circling through Trina's mind, the idea she can't quite shake no matter how wrong she knows it to be, is whether she could take matters into her own hands. Trina is intelligent, resourceful, and has connections throughout Port Charles that could potentially give her access to medical facilities and laboratory equipment. What if she decided to play puppet master with the paternity results? What if she could somehow manipulate the tests to ensure they identify Curtis as the father, eliminating Isaiah from the equation entirely and giving her parents the excuse they need to work on their marriage? It's a dangerous line of thinking that could lead Trina down a very dark path. But desperate people in desperate situations often contemplate desperate measures. The ethical implications of Trina interfering with paternity tests are staggering, and the potential consequences, if she were caught, would be devastating. She could face criminal charges for tampering with medical evidence, destroy her own credibility and reputation, and ultimately cause even more pain for everyone involved. But when you're watching your family disintegrate before your eyes and you feel powerless to stop it, rational thinking often takes a backseat to emotional desperation. Trina has proven time and again that she's willing to fight for the people she loves, sometimes at great personal cost. The question is whether her love for her family would push her to cross ethical and legal boundaries she never imagined she'd even approach. And then there's the wild card that absolutely no one has considered, but could blow this entire situation wide open in the most unexpected way imaginable. Heather Weber. Yes, that Heather Weber, the one who supposedly received treatment for her mental health issues and was released back into society with assurances that she was no longer a threat to anyone. The last time viewers caught a glimpse of Heather, she was bidding farewell to little Ace Casadini, promising the child she would return. But there was something deeply unsettling about the way she delivered that promise. Something in her tone and the look in her eyes that suggested the supposed rehabilitation and healing had been nothing more than an elaborate performance. Heather has never been one to forget a slight or forgive those who've wronged her, and Portia Robinson definitely falls into that category. Their history is complicated and contentious, marked by conflicts and confrontations that left both women harboring significant resentment toward each other. If Heather has indeed been biding her time and waiting for the perfect opportunity to exact revenge on those who've crossed her, this paternity drama presents an absolutely ideal scenario for her twisted sense of justice. Imagine the chaos and devastation Heather could orchestrate if she gained access to the paternity test samples or results. With her history of manipulating medical records and her complete lack of moral constraints, Heather could easily alter the tests to produce false results that would tear lives apart and create maximum suffering for everyone involved. The ultimate revenge would be watching Portia raise a child with the wrong man, building an entire life based on fraudulent paternity results, only to have the truth explosively revealed years later when the damage would be impossible to repair. Heather's return to Port Charles has been inevitable from the moment she walked out of that facility, and the timing of this paternity crisis might be exactly what brings her back into the fold. She could present herself as a concerned citizen who just happened to notice irregularities in laboratory procedures, or she could work behind the scenes in complete secrecy, manipulating events without anyone realizing she's involved until it's far too late to undo the damage. Either way, Heather Weber's potential involvement in this storyline adds a layer of unpredictability and danger that elevates the stakes exponentially. The coming weeks in Port Charles promise to deliver some of the most emotionally charged and dramatically intense scenes General Hospital has produced in recent memory. Portia's public humiliation and private agony, Curtis's struggle to determine whether he can ever trust his wife again, Trina's desperate attempts to salvage her family, Isaiah's potentially sinister machinations, and Heather's looming presence all combine to create a perfect storm of chaos and conflict that will leave no one unscathed. Next, we will learn about the issue of Laura Collins' darkest hour and how one calculated frame job has turned Port Charles' most respected leader into a puppet for a dangerous criminal mastermind. This explosive storyline has viewers on the edge of their seats as we witness the systematic destruction of a woman who has spent her entire life doing the right thing, only to have one moment of panic become the weapon used against her, the frame that changed everything. Laura Collins has been the moral foundation of Port Charles for decades. As mayor, as a mother, as a friend, she has always represented integrity in a town where corruption and violence often reign supreme. But on November 20th, everything she had built came crashing down in the most horrific way imaginable. Picture the scene. Laura approaches her vehicle in what should have been an ordinary moment. Perhaps she was returning from a city council meeting, or maybe she had just finished visiting one of her grandchildren. Whatever normalcy existed in that moment evaporated the instant she opened her trunk. Professor Henry Dalton's lifeless body lay there, eyes frozen in death, blood staining the interior of her car. The shock must have been paralyzing. This wasn't just any dead body. This was a respected academic, someone with connections throughout Port Charles, someone whose disappearance would immediately trigger a massive investigation. And here he was, planted in her vehicle like evidence in the world's most vicious setup. The human brain does strange things under extreme stress. Fight or flight instincts take over, and rational thinking becomes secondary to survival. Laura Collins, a woman who had spent years advocating for law and order, who had worked closely with the PCPD on countless initiatives, suddenly found herself unable to do the one thing she had always preached: call the police and tell the truth. Because the truth looked damning. The evidence was literally in her possession. How could she explain this? Who would believe that someone had deliberately framed the mayor of Port Charles for murder? Sonny's fatal loyalty. Enters Sonny Corinthos, a man whose entire existence revolves around protecting the people he considers family. When Laura reached out in her moment of absolute terror, Sonny didn't hesitate. This is what makes him both dangerous and admirable. His unwavering commitment to those he cares about, regardless of the personal cost. Sonny has made his fortune through questionable means, but his loyalty has always been his defining characteristic. He arrived at the scene, assessed the nightmare unfolding before him, and immediately took control. This wasn't the first body Sonny Corinthos had dealt with, and his experience in crisis management kicked in instantly, with Jason Morgan's assistance. Because Jason is always there when Sonny needs him, they executed what should have been the perfect disposal. The body disappeared. The evidence was erased. The crime scene was sanitized so thoroughly that no forensic team would ever find a trace of what had occurred. But here's where Sonny made his critical miscalculation. He assumed they were dealing with a typical Port Charles criminal situation. Someone trying to set up Laura, someone who could be intimidated or eliminated through traditional mob channels. What he didn't anticipate was that Jen Sidwell had been playing a much longer game. Sidwell didn't just want to frame Laura for murder. He wanted to create a scenario where both Laura and Sonny would be trapped, where their attempts to escape the frame would become the very chains that bound them. Because while Sonny and Jason were busy making that body disappear, Sidwell's people were documenting everything, every moment, every angle. The photographs that Sidwell now possesses don't just show a dead body in Laura's car. They show Port Charles Mayor and its most notorious crime boss working together to dispose of murder evidence. The pictures tell a story that no jury would ever question: conspiracy to conceal a homicide. Sidwell's perfect chess move. Jen Sidwell walked into Laura's home on December 4th not as a supplicant or a blackmailer scrambling for leverage. He walked in as a conqueror, someone who knew the game was already over and he had won. The photographs he spread across Laura's table weren't just evidence. They were a contract written in implied threats and certain destruction. Consider the psychological warfare at play here. Sidwell didn't send these photos through intermediaries. He didn't make anonymous threats or work through proxies. He came to her home. He sat in her living space, the sanctuary where she should feel safest, and calmly explained how thoroughly he owned her future. Every city permit that SRE worldwide needs for their operations? Approved. Every safety inspection that might reveal the true nature of their mineral imports? Overlooked. Every city council vote that could interfere with Sidwell's expansion into Port Charles? Laura will make sure it goes his way. The sheer audacity of his approach speaks to his confidence. Sidwell has done his homework on Laura Collins. He knows her history with the Casadinis, her battles against other criminals, her reputation for finding creative solutions to impossible situations, and he structured his trap specifically to eliminate every possible escape route she might consider. The baby monitor threat. But Sidwell's most chilling move came when baby A started crying through the monitor. The way Sidwell picked up that device, studied it with calculated interest, and then delivered his line about everyone has a price. That wasn't just about money or political favors. That was Sidwell demonstrating that he understood the full scope of Laura's vulnerabilities. Ace Casadini, Laura's infant grandson, represents pure innocence in this scenario. He's Esme and Nicola's child, caught in the complicated web of Casadini family drama, but ultimately just a baby who deserves protection. When Sidwell touched that monitor, he was sending an unmistakable message. I can reach anyone you love, anytime I want. The fact that he made this threat in Laura's own home, surrounded by family photos and mementos of her children and grandchildren, made it even more visceral. Kevin Collins, Laura's husband, is also now an unwitting pawn in Sidwell's game. Kevin is a psychiatrist, a man of science and ethics, someone who has spent his career helping people navigate their darkest moments. How does Laura protect him from the truth of what she's done? How does she continue their marriage while carrying this devastating secret? Every conversation becomes a minefield. Every intimate moment is shadowed by the knowledge that she's living a lie. And then there's Lulu, sweet, brave Lulu, who just emerged from a years-long coma to reunite with her children and rebuild her life. Lulu's recovery should have been the most joyous moment in Laura's recent memory. Instead, it's tainted by the knowledge that Sidwell could destroy this happiness at any moment. One phone call to the PCPD, one envelope delivered to Dante, and everything Lulu has fought to reclaim would be shattered by her mother's scandal. The impossible math of confession. Every single day, Laura Collins runs the same calculation in her mind, searching for a solution that doesn't exist. The logic is brutally simple. Confess the truth, and Sidwell's leverage evaporates. Blackmail only works when the victim values their secret more than their freedom. If Laura walks into the Port Charles Police Department, sits down with Dante Falconeri, and explains exactly what happened, the frame, the panic, the disposal, then Sidwell's photographs become meaningless. But that confession requires explaining logistics that don't make sense without Sonny's involvement. Laura Collins is a woman in her mid-60s. She's fit and active, certainly, but she's not physically capable of single-handedly moving a grown man's corpse from her trunk, transporting it to a secondary location, and burying it so effectively that police investigators would never find it. The story simply doesn't work with just Laura as the protagonist. And once she names Sonny as her accomplice, the entire narrative shifts. The PCPD wouldn't just investigate the disposal. They'd investigate the murder itself with renewed vigor, looking for mob connections and criminal motivations. Sonny Corinthos helping the mayor dispose of a body? That's a major RICO case waiting to happen. Federal prosecutors would get involved. The DA's office would pull out every stop to build a case against Port Charles' most prominent organized crime figure. Sonny would go to prison, not for a few years, but potentially for life. Accessory after the fact to murder, conspiracy to obstruct justice, tampering with evidence, the charges would pile up like building blocks of destruction. And Laura would be the one who put him there, repaying his loyalty with betrayal, destroying him for the crime of trying to help her. The weight of gratitude and guilt. The emotional torture Laura experiences isn't just about fear of exposure or concern for her family's safety. It's about gratitude twisted into guilt. Sonny Corinthos showed up for her when she was at her absolute lowest point. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand favors or future considerations. He simply acted, using his particular skill set to solve her impossible problem. This is what Sonny does for people he cares about. It's why, despite his criminal activities, he maintains such fierce loyalty from his associates and friends. When you're in Sonny's circle, you know that if you need help, any kind of help, no matter how dark or dangerous, he will be there. And now Laura owes him everything, but she can't repay him without destroying herself, and she can't save herself without destroying him. The psychological pressure of this double bind is staggering. Laura lies awake at night. We can imagine, running through scenarios. What if she confesses but leaves Sonny out of it? Impossible. The physical evidence doesn't support it. What if she claims someone else helped her? That's obstruction, and it falls apart under investigation. What if she tries to gather evidence against Sidwell to counter-blackmail him? Too risky. He'd expose her before she could act. Sidwell's expanding control. Meanwhile, Jen Sidwell is settling into Windermere Castle like a conquering warlord claiming his throne. The symbolism isn't subtle. Windermere has always represented power in Port Charles, the Casa Dini stronghold that has witnessed countless schemes and betrayals. Now it houses a new kind of villain, one who doesn't rely on Casa Dini madness or theatrical plotting, but rather on calculated business strategy and ruthless exploitation of human weakness. SRE Worldwide's mineral imports are almost certainly a front for something far more sinister. Drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, human trafficking, whatever criminal enterprise Sidwell is running, he now has the tacit approval of Port Charles government through Laura's coerced cooperation. Every shipping container that arrives at the docks, every warehouse that stores suspicious cargo, every business front that opens its doors, Laura knows what's happening, and she's powerless to stop it. The city she has worked so hard to protect and improve is being corrupted from within, and she's the instrument of that corruption. Port Charles citizens go about their daily lives unaware that their mayor is essentially a puppet for organized crime. The irony is crushing. Laura Collins, who has fought against corruption her entire career, has become the corruption she always opposed. The Christmas illusion. The recent Christmas celebration with Lulu and the family provided a brief respite from the nightmare. Sonny arriving as Santa Claus, distributing presents, creating moments of genuine joy for the children. It was beautiful and heartwarming and completely surreal given the circumstances. Laura watched her daughter embrace her children, saw the smiles and laughter, felt the warmth of family love, and knew that all of it was built on a foundation of lies. How do you enjoy a Christmas miracle when you're living in constant terror? How do you celebrate your daughter's recovery when you know that one wrong move could destroy everything? Laura went through the motions of holiday cheer while internally counting down to January, when the real world would crash back in and the blackmail would continue. Sonny, playing Santa with genuine affection for the Spencer family, probably had similar thoughts running through his mind. He and Laura share this burden now, this secret that connects them in the worst possible way. They can't discuss it openly, can't strategize together, can't even acknowledge the elephant in the room when they're around others. They're co-conspirators by necessity, bound together by a crime neither of them wanted to commit. The January reckoning. As the calendar turns to the new year, nothing has changed in the fundamental equation. The question facing her isn't whether to confess, it's whether she can continue living this lie indefinitely. How long can she maintain the facade? How many more city council meetings can she attend, knowing she's betraying her constituents? How many more family dinners can she sit through, keeping this enormous secret from Kevin and her children? How many more mornings can she look at herself in the mirror? And what about Sonny? He's facing the same impossible situation from a different angle. He can't confess without implicating Laura, and his confession would likely mean never seeing Donna and Avery grow up, missing out on his children's lives, dying behind bars. But continuing the silence means watching Laura suffer under Sidwell's thumb, knowing he's partially responsible for her nightmare. The brilliance of Sidwell's trap is that it's self-sustaining. Laura and Sonny can't turn on each other without destroying themselves. They can't confess without mutual destruction. They can't fight back without risking exposure. And every day they wait, every decision Laura makes under Sidwell's influence, every concession she grants to SRE worldwide, adds another layer to their crimes. Welcome to the darkest chapter of Laura Collins' story, a tale where the hero has become complicit in villainy, where loyalty becomes a weapon, and where the only way out might be martyrdom. This storyline is far from over, and the consequences of that November night continue to ripple through Port Charles with devastating effect.